Okay, we're back to the supermarket together. And, tingnan natin yung last perk. Tagal pa. Anyways, may nalaro din ako like a couple of days off screen. And parang may nakita ko, may upgrade na naman tong upgrade na naman ng game. This time may involves na parang brooms. At saka lumaki na rin yung manager's room. Medyo dito matagal ang loading Yun. Ito nangyayari So anyways, yung broom na rin is may bago ng mga skins. Kasi ang problema nito is, tapos ito yung mga gashapon so parang out of 2. Yan yung mga iba yung mga designs ng brooms. Tira. Maghawak ko to. Kita rin yung design. At kapag binitaw, ay, balik sa dati. Anyways, during off screen na to, 4? Oh my god, 4 na nano ko. For na franchise points, now we need to aim for yun natin 6 pa. Kaya siguro. Hintay ito, dapat madali natin makita. Ay, mukhang masadali yata na ito. Wag lala. Dito na muna tayo. Lahat-lahatin natin muna. Tapos, upgrade na natin. Yan. Wait lang, para pag-inam muna na to. Security, restocker, no tasks. Hati-hati muna. Ito, setup natin to. Ay, ba pala na-open ko?
Have you ever been playing Left 4 Dead and wonder how the survivors get from one place to another? Well, it's actually pretty simple to find out. All we have to do is analyze the beginning and end of every map and look at the vehicles that they use to traverse to each map. Maybe you're new to Left 4 Dead, welcome. For those of you who don't know, pretty much everyone who clicked on this video knows it's a horde shooting co-op game. And as the survivors go from one place to another, they use a bunch of different means. Mostly it's a helicopter or a sort of vehicle, maybe like a boat or a car. So in today's video, I want to particularly analyze the in-map areas. What vehicles, where do they go, where do they end up, and not just reading off a wiki. If we get to 1,000 likes, I'll post a picture of my bunny, so make sure you subscribe, and as soon as I post a photo on my community tab, it'll show up on your homepage. You won't need to come back, none of that. So make sure you're subscribed. Again, if we hit 1,000 likes, and members is live on my channel. I don't really do a lot for monetization things. If you subscribe to the membership on my channel, I'll shout you out at the end of every video. I'm gonna be posting things in the member section, as well as more bunny pictures, life updates, and maybe even videos, and potentially a Discord server where I can play with the community. But with that out of the way, let's look at the end and the beginning of each map in Left 4 Dead 2. Let's begin. So starting at the very beginning, how do the survivors get to No Mercy? In the intro cutscene, we see them walking around the city of No Mercy, and as they're walking around, they trigger a horde, either meet a tank, but whatever it is, it causes them to run into the back alleys between the apartments. Lewis notices a ladder as they're getting chased. They all subsequently climb up that ladder, get onto the top before Zoe almost falls, but fortunately, Francis catches her, and the tank falls to their death, and that's where we begin here at the start of No Mercy. However, there are a few discrepancies. If you take the time to look, they land on a platform at the end of the cinematic where they help Zoe up. However, if you take a look on this upper part of this apartment here up on the roof, there is no place for them to sit. It's blocked here by this window. Supposedly right here in this corner is where they would sit, that little plate thing. However, like I just mentioned, it's not here. There's there's another discrepancy. For example, at where the ladder's supposed to be, it's not there. There's supposed to be a hole in the wall where the tank smashes and then ends up grabbing a rock. And all these assets we don't actually see in the trailer, and this entire alley is extremely dark. That rubble there is supposedly where the stairs fell down. However, all those discrepancies are kind of a bit understandable. I mean, they probably made the trailer and then made the map, or it might be the other way around. Source does it differently. I think it's interesting to take a look and point out. So as the survivors make their way through No Mercy, they go down underground, they hit a subway, they go to a generator room, they pass by a gas station, eventually making their way to a hospital. As the survivors come out of the beginning room, they make their way through the under part of the roof, eventually making it to the top and calling the helicopter. So when the survivors make their way to the rooftop, they stumble upon a radio and they're able to talk to the pilot. So the chopper says they're 15 minutes out, and the survivors make this stand on top of the rooftop, defending their position. So that's what the survivors do. Once the survivors hold out long enough, the helicopter arrives and picks them up. Now this is important because, as we all know, this is the end of the map, so this vehicle in particular is what we need to link the next map. For a very long time, the next map was Death Toll. There was nothing in between. However, with the addition of Crash Course a couple months or a year later, we know what connects both No Mercy and Death Toll. So the survivors make their escape, and supposedly they go on for a pretty long time before we actually end up at the map Crash Course. So the next map the survivors end up at is Crash Course. And from dialogue, we actually find out that Zoe is the one who kills the pilot because he turned into a zombie. Crash Course was added after all the Left 4 Dead 1 maps came out. However, it takes place between No Mercy and Death Toll. And this is important because for a long time we didn't know how the survivors made it off this helicopter and to Death Toll, but now we do. Now this is pretty obvious. I really like this detail because it tells you this is exactly what happened. Here you are, here's your mission. I like how straightforward and to the point it is. If we analyze this helicopter, you can indeed see that this is the exact News 5 chopper that they used to escape No Mercy. So as the survivors make their way through the first map and second map, they make their way to a junkyard and stumble upon another vehicle. This vehicle is very important because we're gonna see it at the beginning of Death Toll. So the survivors start up the generator and they prepare to defend. And once the survivors successfully defend this area, the truck then lowers and they're able to get in the truck and successfully extract from the map. And with that, the survivors are then led to Death Toll. Once the survivors make it to the beginning of Death Toll, as I've mentioned for a very long time, this is a big important thing because for a long time I personally didn't know how they got to Death Toll. But if you look behind you, doesn't that truck look familiar? And by going into no clip mode, we can analyze this truck. A lot of keen-eyed viewers actually suggested that if I go back into Left 4 Dead 1, there are a lot of differences between the first one and the second one. There are a lot of assets that people added and removed. For example, in my previous video when I was looking at the cops on the floor in No Mercy subway, a lot of people mentioned that that wasn't originally in Left 4 Dead 1. Now I wonder, I don't have Left 4 Dead 1, I could definitely get it and check it out maybe in a future video, but for today's video, let me know down below, was this truck originally in Left 4 Dead 1? And if it was, that's pretty cool. But this is the beginning of Death Toll, and as they make their way through the campaign, they end up at a boathouse. Once the survivors make their way to the finale house on the corner, by walking through the forest, there's a radio that they find, and if you listen closely, there's a voice line where they tell you that there's two people. They give you a last name. They say that they're just a fishing family and they'd love to pick you up. So the survivors talk to them and await their arrival. Once the survivors have successfully defended their position, they are then met with the boat, in which they make their way down to the docks and are successfully able to leave the Death Toll campaign. And with that, they successfully escape, leading them to dead air. Like I mentioned, the next map they find their way to is Dead Air. Now, as we analyze the beginning of this map, this is where you start. There is no clear begin point from the end of the map. What is the off-camera sort of out-of-eye movement that the survivors make to get themselves here? The part that I'm going to show you is pretty much speculation, but some people on a very early video of mine mentioned that you can actually find the boat from Death Toll here, but that might not make sense for reasons I'll explain in a bit. If you no-clip out of the map, you can actually find this shipping vessel here that's very close to the greenhouse. You can see the greenhouse is right here on top of this rooftop, and down here is this shipping vessel. However, if you compare the shipping vessel to the ship at the end of Death Toll, they aren't the same exact ship. However, a lot of people believe that there was supposed to be a map in between both Death Toll and Dead Air. So this is kind of what connects it in universe, but not really what they had game design wise. If you guys have any theories or differing opinions about how they got from Death Toll to Dead Air, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theories. But as the survivors fight their way through the Dead Air campaign, they go into a crane yard, they go through a construction yard, eventually making their way to an airport where they find a huge AC-130 and they talk to the pilot, they fill it up, and they successfully extract. So let's teleport to there now. Right as the survivors stumble out of the finale safe room, they are met with a huge giant crashing plane. Making their way from that plane crash, and they refuel his AC-130, and in return, they fly him out.
Lagi na naman.
And with that, the survivors make their way, oddly enough, to Blood Harvest. It's not a very good place to continue because there is supposed to be a map between both Dead Air and Blood Harvest, because as we'll find out, they start in the middle of nowhere. So let's jump over to Blood Harvest. So as we make our way over to Blood Harvest, there's a couple big questions that I have that I think everyone has if they're not a really in-depth looker into the lore of Left 4 Dead 2. Now, the first big one is the fact that we just saw them leave in a giant military AC-130. Now, where is that AC-130? Because we start off in a camp with some sleeping bags and a fire, it doesn't look to me like there's any AC-130. By looking online, the Google AI wasn't very helpful, but scouring through some Reddit posts, I see people saying that there was a cut campaign between Dead Air and Blood Harvest that would connect them in that way. However, if you want to do a in-story with a canon explanation, the most realistic option is that the plane probably crashed somewhere in the forest nearby. The survivors survived, went through the forest, and made camp here, where they would then go on to start the Blood Harvest campaign. Going into no-clip mode, you can't really find a plane. I mean, you could argue that maybe it was like down here or something, but there's no physical asset that would lead you to come to that explanation naturally, so we kind of have to just infer here. But I think if Left 4 Dead 2 were to ever get remastered, adding a plane right here or like in the woods nearby or like off in the distance would be really cool. They make their way through the forest, eventually going through a train yard, making their way to a train station with a bridge, knocking down the bridge, heading by the train tracks some more, and eventually making it to the military outpost. outpost. So let's go to the final mission. Once the survivors make it to the final chapter in Blood Harvest, they enter this train car which has been jammed at the end of this bridge. As they leave the train car, they continue to follow the train tracks and they climb up a
Ayan,
train,
madami kasi
which eventually
items.
leads them to a cornfield and subsequently the military outpost. Inside the military outpost, you can find a radio which will start the evacuation event, but you can also see that there are a bunch of dead military bodies along with a bunch of maps that you can look at, seeing an entire peninsula overrun along with some northern regions and eventually a safe zone north. So that's supposedly where the Left 4 Dead survivors are going to be heading to. Once the players have gotten ready, they prepare for the incoming doom, and once that's over, we'll resume with the finale. So once the survivors survive long enough for the truck to arrive, the military comes, and this is the few times that the military actually helps. But the survivors board onto the military vehicle and they successfully escape. We'll talk about the last stand later, but for now, let's head over to the sacrifice campaign and check it out.
Zoe, you still mad?
Those people still dead?
Come on, let's move.
Beginning at the start of the sacrifice campaign, you start at the chapter named Docks. They come in from a train, they shoot a bunch of zombies, and they eventually leave and they jump down here. They see some boats, they talk about it, but once in a while you can get a voice dialogue that talks about a conflict between Zoe and Bill. Back at the military outpost, they had to leave a lot of people to die, so there's a little bit of conflict there between Zoe and Bill. They make their way from the military outpost eventually to this train, which allows them to come here to the docks. As they go throughout the sacrifice campaign, they make their way looking for a sailboat on the coastline slash kind of canal area of this city, eventually making their way to the port. Once the survivors make their way to the final chapter in the sacrifice, they continue to talk about how they're trying to find a sailboat and their end goal is to make it to the Keys and live on an island for the rest of their lives. So with that plan in their mind, they go ahead, make their way through the port, and eventually make it to this bridge. At this bridge, they have to set up multiple generators, which is going to allow them to lower the bridge and subsequently go across it. And if you come over here next to the bridge and you look down, you can actually see this is the boat, the sailboat that they're going to use to escape, and this area is also depicted in the Sacrifice comics. But this is the last canon ending, and this is the ending overall for the Left 4 Dead 1 survivors, as we don't know how they go on further. We know that they supposedly make it to an island, however, a future for this has never really been made or crafted. All we have is mods. However, there is an alternate reality map called The Last Stand, which I want to take a look at. So let's go ahead, jump over to The Last Stand and take a look at it. For the next area, I bring you to the last map in Death Toll, and for those of you who remember, the title of this video is How Do Each of the Maps Connect? To understand The Last Stand, you have to come to Death Toll, because as I mentioned, it's an alternate reality slash